Good morning. The committee meets today to consider the nomination of Lieutenant General Timothy Hawk to be promoted to general and to be the next commander of U.S. Cyber Command and director of the National Security Agency. General, congratulations on your nomination. I'd also like to welcome your wife, Sherry, your daughter, Chandler, your daughter-in-law, Hannah, and your son, Michael. We are grateful to your family for the support they have given you and the military over many years. Let me also recognize the outgoing Commander General Nakasone as he prepares for retirement. I would like to express my appreciation for his 37 years of service to the nation, including his outstanding leadership of the United States Cyber and Intelligence Forces. General Hawk, the committee welcomes your nomination to lead Cybercom and the NSA. As the current deputy, you have a comprehensive understanding of the urgent cybersecurity and intelligence challenges facing the nation. You have held a number of senior positions at Cybercom and within the Air Force cyber and intelligence organizations and commands, including multiple command assignments. These experiences will serve you well. General, if confirmed, there are a number of pressing issues that will require your attention. First and foremost, it is widely understood that our cyber mission forces are struggling with readiness shortfalls caused primarily by difficulties in training and retaining personnel in key positions requiring special skills. In order to mature the cyber force and advance our nation's capabilities to conduct cyber operations and support intelligence operations, the military services must provide qualified and trained personnel to your command on time and at the beginning of their tours. I would also note that the private sector has realized the immense value of our cyber operators and is offering them very high compensation to leave the military. The services must adjust accordingly by providing a creative combination of incentives to compete for and retain these personnel. I'd like to know how you plan to address this challenge. Additionally, over the last decade, there has been a recurring debate over whether to sustain the dual hat arrangement whereby the commander of Cyber Command also serves as the director of the NSA. Recently, an independent panel established by the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense and led by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford, concluded that the dual hat arrangement should be sustained, and we would welcome your thoughts on that issue also. Finally, I would note that some of the tools in our toolbox, like Section 702 authority from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, are critical to our ability to counter our adversaries' malign activities. The committee would appreciate your views on the importance of Section 702 of FISA, which sunsets at the end of this year, and why you believe it is essential that we renew that authority. We would also like to know what guardrails are in place to give the public confidence that the authority is being used judiciously. General, these complex challenges will require the full complement of your skills. Thank you for your willingness to continue your service and lead Cybercom and the NSA at this critical time. I look forward to your testimony. Let me now recognize the ranking member, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Hawk, for being here, and I join the distinguished chairman in welcoming your family. You have been nominated by the President for Commander of the United States Cyber Command. If confirmed, you will be directly responsible for planning and executing U.S. global cyber operations activities and missions to defend our national interest across the full spectrum of competition and conflict in cyberspace. This includes DoD's cyberspace operations, enhancing the offensive and defensive capabilities of the cyber mission force, and improving the readiness of the nation's cyber personnel to counter malicious cyber actors in a changing digital domain. This hearing comes at a pivotal moment for defending cyberspace. General Nakasone, our nation's outgoing commander of Cyber Command, has said the growth in cyber warfare capabilities by our near-peer adversaries, like China, is unlike anything he has seen before. In recent months, we've seen an increase in ransomware attacks on critical infrastructure and aggressive cyber espionage operations on U.S. networks by our near-peer adversaries. Software vulnerabilities and weak network perimeter security have added to the nation's defensive challenges and threaten our strategic ability and decisive advantage in cyberspace. We must keep that decisive advantage. Advancements in technology such as artificial intelligence are also poised to change the pace of the threats we face. Given these challenges, the committee would like to learn how you plan to address the most pressing national security challenges facing our nation in cyberspace. Specifically, I'm interested in hearing what you would do to ensure cybercom's depend forward and persistent engagement strategies. Those strategies support a proactive military posture in cyberspace and remain capable of disrupting malicious cyber activity at its source and keep pace with an evolving threat. I'm concerned that our cyber readiness may suffer because of cyber mission forces serving brief tours at Cybercom, and the chair mentioned this in his statement. The services are providing personnel to Cybercom who lack necessary cyber skills, technical expertise, and training. I would welcome your views on how to correct readiness shortfalls within the cyber mission force, including how you would work with the services to align training across the department and increase the resiliency of the cyber workforce. Strengthening partnerships across the government, the private sector, and among our allies is also key to defending our national interests in a constantly evolving threat environment. These include hunt-forward operations, in which cyber operators are deployed abroad to identify vulnerabilities and malware on the networks of partner nations. The Under Advisement Program, which creates a forum for threat information sharing with industry, is another example of Cyber Command's unique contributions to national security. These two initiatives exemplify how our cyber forces augment homeland and network defenses while also exposing adversary tactics before they can be used against us in the United States. I hope you'll speak about how you would prioritize partnerships to meet the growing complexity of challenges in the cyber domain. If confirmed, General, you would serve as the Chief of the Central Security Service and would take on a dual-headed role as Director of the National Security Agency. And so we'll be interested in hearing your perspective on the dual-hat arrangement and how it impacts Cybercom's ability to fulfill its individual mission. So thank you very much, General, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. General Hawk, your statement, please.
Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, I am honored to appear before you today regarding my nomination as Commander, U.S. Cyber Command and Director of the National Security Agency. I want to thank President Biden, Secretary Austin, Director Haynes, and General Milley for their trust in nominating me for these critical positions. I'd also like to thank my bride, Sherry, who has served with me for the last 31 years. I would also like to thank our children, Michael and Chandler, who have sacrificed as military children and are now thriving as adults. Michael is a captain and company commander in the North Carolina National Guard, and Chandler is a commercial cybersecurity analyst. Sherry and I are incredibly grateful for their sacrifices to enable our service as a family. Also with us today is our daughter-in-law, Hannah, a director of strategy and product development for an advanced materials company. Joining us virtually is my mom, Leona, who with my late father instilled the value of service at an early age. Thank you, Mom. I want to begin by thanking General Nakasone and Susan Nakasone for their service to the United States Cyber Command and National Security Agency. General Nakasone has 37 years of dedicated service, culminating as commander and director for the last 5 years. His commitment to both the mission and the people during a time of unparalleled global change has continued the legacy captured in the command's code: partner, enable, deliver. I truly believe that Cyber Command has delivered for the nation due to his leadership. A special thanks to Susan Nakasone for her commitment to her family and for her willingness to focus on and address tough issues facing the Army, the agency, and the command spouses and families. I am a career intelligence officer who has served 31 years in the Joint Force, intelligence, and cyber communities. My service in command and staff positions at all levels, to include multiple assignments within Cyber Command, NSA, and the cryptologic enterprise, have given me unique insights of the opportunities and challenges facing the nation and the critical roles of Cyber Command and NSA. As part of Cyber Command's senior leadership team and in my prior roles within the command, I have gained invaluable operational experience in cyber and an appreciation for the unparalleled mission advantage that stems from the close operating partnership of these two organizations. I consider it the highest privilege to be nominated to lead these organizations. And if confirmed, I am committed to further build upon our competitive strengths: people, innovation, and partnerships. I believe every great success starts with people. Both NSA and Cyber Command have some of the nation's most talented individuals who are the backbone of mission success. To sustain that success, we must focus on recruiting, training, and retaining talent from across the nation and must provide an environment where they can thrive and succeed. For Cyber Command, that means continued focus on readiness and the growth of our acquisition force. For NSA, it means hiring the right workforce for the challenges we face during a period of significant retirement turnover. In an environment of accelerating change, the ability to rapidly adapt and innovate is critical to mission advantage. Congress and the Department have set the conditions for Cyber Command to rapidly mature. The expansion of its acquisition authorities and the ongoing implementation of enhanced budget control will enable improved capabilities across the force. When coupled with the authorities to partner with industry and small business, Cyber Command can deliver innovative cyber capabilities for warfighting advantage. Partnerships are a critical component of both organizations' success. The ability to work in collaboration across the interagency with the private sector and foreign partners is critically important to our nation's success in a world of accelerating change. We see this in the work of both organizations with partners throughout government, such as the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, FBI, as well as expanding efforts to build cybersecurity relationships worldwide. The command's hunt-forward operations and collaborative exposure of adversary cyber actions within NSA are proven examples to build upon. If confirmed, I will focus on ensuring the health and effectiveness of NSA and Cyber Command's world-class personnel in delivering outcomes to address the nation's security priorities, also the priorities of the department and the combatant commands. I will focus on strengthening the workforce, improving the readiness of our cyber mission force, investing to leverage new technologies, and prioritizing threats facing the nation, especially those from the pacing challenge posed by the People's Republic of China. In closing, I'm deeply honored to be considered for these leadership positions. If confirmed, I look forward to working with the committee and the entire Congress to ensure we leverage our opportunities and address these challenges. Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, General Hawk. I have a series of questions which are presented to all nominees. Please respond accordingly. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes, Chairman.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of this confirmation process?
No, Chairman.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibilities makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes, Chairman.
Do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration?
Yes, Chairman.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes, Chairman.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes, Chairman.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes, Chairman.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes, Chairman.
Thank you very much, General. As we both mentioned, Senator Wicker and I, one of the issues that you've addressed also is the cyber mission forces and their readiness. This is, I believe, General Nakasoni's #1 challenge at this moment, and it'll be yours. Where do you see this in terms of your priorities? I assume it's very close to the top. And second, These forces are composed by members from the other services, and how do you coordinate so that these people come ready and willing to serve and to function?
Senator, from a cyber readiness perspective, this is the top issue for Cyber Command. We just recently, in response to a request from Congress, submitted a report for Section 1502 that identified the Cyber Command assessment of readiness. And what that report says is we view FY24 and the overall passing of both the NDAA and the appropriations bill as a critical moment that now aligns the responsibilities and authorities within U.S. Cyber Command analogous to those of U.S. Special Operations Command. So with the passing of the FY24 appropriations bill, U.S. Cyber Command will now have the responsibility for the Cyber Mission Force budget. We'll have the responsibility for the acquisition of the capabilities for our Cyber Mission Force and have the authority to set the training standards. So with those authorities, it allows Cyber Command to set the investment in our training infrastructure, in our training courses, and allows the services to focus on recruiting, initial skills training aligned to our standard, and then to leverage the retention capabilities that Congress has given to the services. So those are areas now that really change the dynamic of how we will approach cyber readiness if confirmed.
Thank you, General. General, I also mentioned in my opening remarks Section 702 of FISA, and could you comment on the importance of extending that? It will expire at the end of this year, and also the guardrails that are in place to protect the privacy of citizens in the United States.
Senator, Section 702 is an irreplaceable foreign intelligence authority. It enables the intelligence community to collect against foreign persons overseas. It is a critical authority, and as I think of it in my current role as U.S. Cyber Command, the ability to identify foreign hacking of activities in the United States, whether that be U.S. companies or individuals, it's a critical source to be able to do that. Section 702 supports 100% of the President's intelligence priorities. In some way, it reflects either in the answer or informs that question. In terms of how we ensure oversight, first and foremost, in my experience in working with the national security agencies throughout my career, is a culture of compliance. The National Security Agency and all of the employees are focused on how to protect their fellow Americans, and that includes their civil liberties. So that inside of Section 702 is a rigorous set of oversight, both through personal accountability as well as technical accountability to ensure that the authority is used appropriately for its intended purpose for foreign persons overseas.
Thank you. I also, in my comments, referred to the Dunford report regarding the status of the NSA Director and Commander of Cybercom. I assume you concur with the results of that report, and I think it establishes a very good sort of framework to continue the dual hatting. Your comments?
Senator, I do support the results of General Dunford's study that was accepted by both the Secretary and the Director of National Intelligence. What it reflects is really a maturation of U.S. Cyber Command and that relationship and operational partnership with the National Security Agency being in the best interests of the nation. What it allows is in reality, the signals intelligence and the cyber environments are overlapping. So having a single leader with the ability to align the capabilities of NSA and Cyber Command gives us greater speed and agility. It also allows us to, at the beginning of planning, be very considerate of how do we protect intelligence sources while still being able to position to produce the outcomes the nation needs us to have.
Oh, thank you very much, General Hawk. Before I recognize Senator Wicker, since a quorum is now present, I ask the committee to consider a list of 2,699 pending military nominations. Including in this list are the nominations of General Charles Q. Brown, Jr., United States Air Force, to be Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and General Randy A. George, United States Army, to be to the grade of General and to be Chief of Staff of the Army. All of these nominations have been before the committee the required length of time. Is there a motion to favorably report this list?
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. The motion carries. Senator Wicker.
On the dual hat, General, Is the statute where it should be with regard to what you need in that role?
Senator, I think we have the guidance we need to be effective. An area that we would like to, that if confirmed, I'd like to work with the committee is how do we communicate and ensure oversight with all of the respective committees to ensure that we are being very clear in how we are using the authorities of each of those organizations to the best effect, consistent with our law, our policy, and our values.
Do you think this arrangement should always be the approach, or do you see a time when another administration might not choose to go the dual hat route?
Senator and Ranking Member, in my experience, I've now worked in each sides of these organizations. And so how we partner and be able to take the guidance from a single leader becomes effective in our response. So we can move with a speed and agility today. So from my perspective, I think that would be very difficult to replicate in a different configuration.
You would not change that?
In my perspective, I would not change that, Senator.
Okay, and then on the training or lack thereof, or areas for improvement, tell us to what extent that is enlisted personnel, officers, and how about civilian hires?
Ranking Member, in terms of training of the Cyber Mission Force, the overall makeup of the Cyber Mission Forces themselves, our tactical operational elements, are about 80% military and 20% civilian. So as we approach this, it is largely a civilian force with a significant number of officers that are balanced by civilians. As we look at that force, one of the things that we want to ensure as U.S. Cyber Command is that we're setting that baseline standard so that we can ensure across the department we get the baseline right and allow the services to do that baseline training. And now Congress has equipped us with the authority to build out the training ranges. We have those in place today as U.S. Cyber Command. The authority to build out the advanced training, which we have in place today within U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, and now we'll have the resources to scale that training.
Which one is the 80%?
The 80% is military,
okay,
and of that, the majority would be enlisted.
I see. Okay, and so they would not necessarily have come to the service with cyber skills. They would have learned what they need as members of the military.
We would, Ranking Member, what we would expect is that they would all get baselined in their service training. Many of them, the services are doing assessments early, either in the recruiting process or at basic training to assess and identify, and we'll encourage and work with the services to increase that as we go forward.
It doesn't hurt that quite a number of whiz kids that have been playing video games since they've been able to walk are stepping forward.
Ranking Member, there's certainly a population that is digital, that have grown up as digital natives.
Take a minute then and tell us about the Under Advisement Program and the Hunt Forward operations, which are partnerships with your command.
Senator, 2 years ago, Congress authorized both Cyber Command and NSA to be able to do direct sharing with industry. Inside of U.S. Cyber Command, inside our subunified command of the Cyber National Mission Force, Cyber Command created a program called Under Advisement. Our Under Advisement program allows a small team to interact directly with industry, and it helps us to be able to have an understanding of activities overseas through their lens and identify cyber threats, while also allowing us to provide insights to them about threats that they might receive wherever they operate. The Under Advisement team is also nested very closely with NSA's Cybersecurity Collaboration Center that was also authorized by the same portion of the law as well as by DoD to do direct sharing with industry. That's a critical component that we will seek to expand. The Hunt Forward operations are activities of where we defend forward with a partner or ally within their networks. So they ask for our assistance. We deploy a team of experts from the Cyber Mission Force to work with them on a network provides value to us because we're able to identify adversary malware and to be able to disclose that, not just to that company or to that nation, but also to cybersecurity industry. It also allows us to work with those partners, build trust and confidence, and allow them to also grow their capacity.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant General Houck, congratulations on your nomination to you, and thank you for your willingness to continue to serve, and thank you to your family for their willingness to support you. How do you see developments in AI affecting cybercom and NSA?
Senator, I think about artificial intelligence really in three ways. One is, how do we leverage it to be able to allow our personnel to be able to move faster? Do that in a way that we can ensure from a national security perspective, we're using it in an ethical manner, that we can see the sources of that data, ensure civil liberties are protected. But there's great opportunity, particularly from a cybersecurity perspective, when we think about scale. The second component—
Can I just interrupt for a minute? Because you say using it in an ethical manner. How do you determine that? Because there aren't really standards around AI at this point.
So DoD has published AI ethical standards, so there's a start point for us. For us, what we really want to do is have a partnership between a human analyst and their ability to receive data, know where that data came from, and to be able to accelerate their work. And that's an area that we are doing a study, building an AI roadmap as directed by Congress to do that with the department focused on Cyber Command and Cyber Command's interest. The other area that I think the nation expects from us is to understand how our adversaries use this technology and be able to inform what that looks like in terms of threat, both to our national security and to our industry.
And there's a lot of discussion in the earlier questioning about training and recruitment of people to Cyber Command. Is there particular training that you think we ought to be doing around AI, and how do you see that? Is that something that should be done by Cyber Command? Is it a broader concern across DoD?
Senator, in terms of Cyber Command, our close partnership with the National Security Agency does allow us to build on a legacy of how NSA has leveraged data, has leveraged algorithms, has done it from its outset in a very compliant way to ensure that it's consistent with what we would expect in terms of protecting civil liberties. So we start with a foundation in that partnership. The other area where AI has certainly been a key component within our nation is in cybersecurity. So we start from a foundation that does look a little bit different from the rest of the department. And there are areas for us that we will certainly need to be partnered with the services as they protect networks, as we give guidance for how best to apply, and think about, under our acquisition authorities, the ability to be able to partner with a service, partner with a small business, rapidly introduce that technology, but do it in a way that's consistent with the overall DoD guidance for how we do that from an ethical perspective.
And you mentioned how our adversaries would be using AI. We heard from some experts earlier this week who talked about the real threat from AI and how it could be used to harm citizens in the United States and really around the world. So do we need to be thinking about other regulatory responses, other penalties for those nation states and other groups that would use AI in a way that would damage the United States?
Senator, I won't comment on the regulatory requirement, but I will talk about the threat. When we think about where China has focused much of their AI, it's about information control, it's about facial recognition, it's about dominating a population. So as they consider exporting those technologies, as they've done in the past with the Great Firewall technology, it's an area from a threat perspective that we should continue to inform and understand what that means to any nation that they would be considering partnering with and the implications of that technology on that society.
Thank you. I think it's something this committee needs to continue to look at as well. The war in Ukraine has produced less of an attack on the cyber infrastructure of Ukraine than I expected, and I think than most people expected. Do you think that Ukraine is prepared to handle future attacks by Russia on their infrastructure and other utility grid and other areas?
Senator, Ukraine gets a lot of credit for how they created resiliency in the face of a really relentless cyber actor in Russia. They thought before, when they were given advance warning, how to think about their data and where their data needed to be resilient. They thought about their partnerships with industry, their partnerships with NATO, certainly with the United States and with the Department, to be able to assist in how we provided an opportunity to make sure that they understood threat. And they have done an exceptional job of thinking about what it looks like to be resilient in a really relentless digital environment. One of the reasons Russia hasn't been successful is the resilience of Ukraine.
Well, thank you. I certainly agree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Jean. Senator Mullen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. General, thank you so much for being here, and it's lovely to see your family with you. It was a pleasure to meet them before the hearing started. And as I said back there, I just want to thank your family and your wife for serving alongside of you. Thank you for all that you do in holding the family together. I have said this many times to people that work for me and people I've worked with. We can only be at our best if we have a stable home life. If it's rocky, we can be average. And your husband can't afford to be average, not in this time. So thank you for laying that foundation for him to reach greatness. General, just want to ask a couple questions. I have made no bones about it that your predecessor and I do not get along. I do not agree with his decision-making. I've made it very clear that he's a very risk-averse and lacks the ability to take responsibility when things don't go right. And so I want to make sure that we're not following necessarily all in his footsteps. And so some of the questions I have really deals with some changes that you may be looking to make, and I'd like to get your insight in those. In your time as a deputy commander, what was the collaboration between CyberCon and other combatant commands? What does that look like?
Senator, in terms of collaboration with the other combatant commands, if we look at the overall national defense strategy, we do sit in a unique place. As a global combatant command, our partnerships with each of the other combatant commands, our missions to ensure defense of the Department of Defense Information Network enables every other combatant command, and we're partnered with them on that. Our mission to defend the nation in cyberspace is to ensure that those other combatant commands are resilient to attack by a cyber adversary. And then our third mission is to support those combatant commands with offensive and defensive cyber. What you've seen is a maturation over the last 5 years of looking at how our elements that we provide to those combatant commands. We have teams of between 30 and 50 that are embedded inside of each of the combatant commands to be able to link together to either enable their planning or help them to conduct planning so that we're integrated. And as we think about it, Ukraine has provided a really good example. I was the component to European Command at the time, and so General Walters gave us very clear requirements for how Air Force's cyber and then the broader Cyber Command enterprise could support EUCOM and NATO in their efforts to enable Ukraine.
Do you have any examples of changes that you might want to see moving forward, things that we could do better in those areas?
Senator, I think the number one thing that we'll be thinking about, we've talked about the Cyber Mission Force and the relationship with the new authorities that Congress and the Department are giving us. The other thing that comes with that is an opportunity to scale. So when we think about the things that we're doing well today and our ability to defend forward, having budget control, having acquisition authority, having more control of the overall advanced training will allow us to scale and scale faster.
How has CyberCon collaborated with industry partners in the past, and how do we look at changing those relationships moving forward?
Senator, we have today authorities from from OSD that allow us to do partnerships with small business. So whether they're cooperative research or small contracts, we have started in a number of ways working very closely with small business. As we continue to grow our acquisition authority, we are working with research and engineering to also begin to look at what's our role going to be in science and technology.
Is there some changes we need to be looking at to help you make changes for that relationship to build and move faster?
Senator, the most important thing that would be the passing of the FY24 appropriations bill. And if we, with the FY24 NDAA and the appropriations bill, that will give us those authorities. Without that, we will operate in our previous model until the budget's passed, and then we'll have to undo that work and redo it.
What are some changes we need to be making to invest in? When we're looking at the budget and we're looking at appropriating dollars, where should we be focusing on to give you the advantages you need?
Right now, Senator, when we went through the process of enhanced budget control, the department did a very good job of evaluating what the services had spent on our cyber mission force, and then the department added a significant number over that in the president's budget. So as we look at the president's budget, that is an accurate capture of where we are today that would enable our scaling and our ability to do that. So as we look at the final of the NDA and the appropriations bill, that's what we will be looking for are those numbers in the president's budget. And based on that, we'll come back with the department, who has treated us very well through this process.
General, thank you for being here. Ma'am, thank you for, like I said, the support, and family, thanks for being tolerant and moving as often as you have. Really appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mullins. Senator Manchin, please.
Thank you, Senator. General, thank you again, and I, with my fellow senator, I feel the same way about the family and the family's commitment and the support you have. General Hawk, I believe we strengthen our own cybersecurity, and we've talked about that in your experience there, working with General Nagasoni and continuing on. We're only as strong as our weakest link with our partners around the world, our allied partners. How do you see them coming to that, or lifting up, investing enough, recruiting the right people? Are they able partners? Are they making every effort? Are they working with you, looking for our leadership? Or where do you think we have to double down and work harder?
Senator, this is an area that has really expanded in terms of what both the geographic combatant commands are asking us to do with partners, and those areas that the Department of Defense has asked U.S. Cyber Command to take a leadership role with partners. And when you think about what that gives us in terms of the ability to scale collectively against common threats, we're seeing that. We have a continual increase every year in our cyber flag exercise, where partners come together, and in a multilateral environment, we work on best practices.
Are they making the same commitment you think as we are, or are there any of them ahead of us that we could be doing better to catch up, or are they moving with us in that same time frame?
I think they're moving with us. I think there are partners that we're going to work with, particularly with INDOPACOM. Areas that INDOPACOM has asked us to work is a focus in addition to our longstanding partnerships with Japan and South Korea and Taiwan, Australia. They want us to look at other countries like Singapore, Thailand, and also the Philippines. So those areas we'll invest.
As we talk about retention and recruitment, what is the force strength right now, your force strength as far as cyber?
The overall billet structure of U.S. Cyber Command within our cyber forces is right around 6,000. We hover right around an 85% fill rate today. I won't do that math publicly, Senator.
No problem. Can you fill that void at 15%, do you believe? And how do you intend to do that?
That's a partnership with the services. And I think the more we refine what we need from the services and then allow them to be focused on the recruiting and the retention components and allowing us to develop that force with advanced training, there's going to be a great opportunity for us to continue to grow.
And finally, I'll get to the budget, because there's so many, I've talked to so many militaries, retired and current, off the record, if you will, that have told me that if we got our budget done on time by September 30th, which we never, ever do, hardly, but if we did that, there'd be tremendous savings within the military, especially because you have guarantees and certainties, contracts you have. I've been told at least 5% savings. So if you look at I'll round it off to the $880 billion budget we have for military, that's $44 billion of additional spending that you could do within the confines of what you have. Do you think those savings, I mean, by us being able to get a certain budget, not a CR or an omnibus, as the games we've played here for far too long?
Senator, for U.S. Cyber Command for this year, it's particularly acute. If for every day that we operate under FY23 rules, when the budget is passed, we have to back out every single one of those transactions and then execute them under the new rules that will be passed by Congress. So we will be doubling and tripling our work for every transaction for every day we're in a CR.
I believe so strongly in that, and we haven't done anything to really reprimand ourselves from not doing our job, because all we keep asking for is that we'll just give additional money for basically our lack of doing the urgency that needs to be done for the expertise and also for the cost savings. It's just a shame. So with that, I appreciate very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Manchin. Senator Scott, please.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for being here. Congratulations on your nomination. Thank you for your service and your sacrifice, and same to your family. Thanks for taking time to meet yesterday. As we know, we got a lot of enemies that are trying to infiltrate our system. One of the things that concerns me, and if you could talk about, the DoD has a contract with a Chinese-owned company, Tutor.com. And do you have any background of why we would contract with a Chinese company to do training?
I'm not familiar with that company, Senator.
Okay. So does that,
I can come back with you.
you can come back. But the concept of using a Chinese company to provide any service to our Department of Defense, does that make any sense to you?
Senator, I would look at that really closely from a threat perspective.
Okay. All right. Can you talk about AI and our ability to use AI the right way?
Yes, Senator. I think we do have a long history of leveraging artificial intelligence, particularly in cybersecurity, and the ability to leverage U.S. industry from that perspective, world leader in terms of how we approach artificial intelligence in cybersecurity. So I think from that perspective is a well-established methodology that we want to continue to grow and expand with the services. In terms of how we approach that, if confirmed, how we approach that in the National Security Agency perspective, in my experience, a very methodical way to ensure that we understand every piece of data that comes in, know where it came from, under what authority, to be able to ensure analysts touch that data to make an analysis of it, know where it came from, and know what authority, and ensure that it does not impact the civil liberties of any American.
Do you feel comfortable on AI that any significant decision will still be made by humans, not be made by some system?
Our methodology in terms of how we approach the things that we will require in U.S. Cyber Command and consistent with the department standards is a human will be interfacing with that machine and with that data.
You know, we have another significant presidential election coming up. How do you, and you know, we've watched the past, we watched outside groups, you know, other countries try to infiltrate our systems to have an impact. Do you feel comfortable that we're in a position that we can stop that?
Senator, I have been fortunate enough to be part of each of the department's efforts for election defense since 2018, 2020, and 22, working with Homeland Security and FBI to look at foreign threats to our elections. And as we look at this election cycle, the area that we do have to consider that will be slightly different will be the role of generative AI as part of this. And so our concern is foreign use attempting to be a part of our electoral process.
Right. Earlier this year, Communist China used malware to hack critical infrastructure on our bases in Guam. Experts said this is one of the largest known cyber espionage campaigns against the United States. I also read an article this week about a typo leak that gave Mali, a country that has grown their relationship with Russia, access to diplomatic documents, tax returns, passwords, and travel details of top officers. So does this concern you, and do we have the ability to make sure this doesn't happen?
Senator, the most capable competitor that we have in cyberspace is the PRC. They use cyber to gain political, economic, and military advantage. In the terms of what you describe at Guam, the example of how we are able to be able to identify that threat, how we communicate that threat to enable defense, put out a joint cybersecurity advisory with the interagency, with our allies, and with industry. We've got to continue to scale that, and if confirmed, that'll be one of my focus areas.
How comfortable you are that our space systems that we rely on for, especially for our defense, are not going to get hacked, don't have risk that they're going to go down? What do you think about our ability in space?
Senator, I'll talk about two partnerships that I've been a part of in my previous experience. One is with U.S. Strategic Command, and the work between Cyber Command and STRATCOM on NC3 and our nuclear command and control, which has a critical portion of that is space. The other is our partnership with U.S. Space Command and the Space Force. The Space Force, since stand-up, has really invested and really been and has set some models for how to do cybersecurity of weapons systems. Investing in that area, establishing cybersecurity service providers all the way down to the weapons system level. Those areas are things we need to continue to grow across the department, but within the space segment, that is an area that has been focused on by STRATCOM, Space Command, and Space Force.
Thank you for your service. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator King, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, if you look back at recent history, the really disastrous national security breaches have often come from insiders. Robert Hansen, Aldrin Dames, the most recent one, Edward Snowden. We will never be able to prevent human beings from occasionally being tempted or compromised or whatever. I'm interested in our ability to develop technical means to prevent or detect exfiltration of classified materials. Can you talk to me in a non-classified setting about thinking about that? I mean, clearly we got to vet people and polygraphs and all of those kinds of things, but it would really have helped in this prior case if somebody had noticed that materials were being extracted out of a classified server.
Senator, it's a great question. The protection of our classified information is paramount. It is grave impact to our national security if classified information is disclosed. So how we approach that and how we think about it is really in two ways. One is personal accountability. How do we ensure that we're hiring the right talent and that we do maintain visibility on that talent? And some of the things that the Director of National Intelligence done to transition from a periodic reinvestigation of everyone that has access to classified to a continuous evaluation process. That's a step on personal accountability. From a technical perspective, it is about user activity monitoring and our insider threat programs. Those programs exist at various levels throughout the department.
But I would hope in the light of this recent egregious problem that there would be an intensity to re-examine the technical means.
Yes, Senator, and the Secretary has directed DoD CIO to work with the Undersecretary of Intelligence and Security to look at our overall approach to user activity monitoring to ensure that we have an approach that covers our classified networks.
Thank you. I want to turn, the cornerstone of our whole defense posture is deterrence. That's the basis of our nuclear posture, also our development of conventional forces. My concern is that in cyberspace, deterrence hasn't been a significant part of our arsenal, if you will. Basically, we don't respond very much. Now, I think General Nakasone has responded effectively on elections, and we saw a diminution of Russian activity in 18, 20, and 22, I think in large part because of that response. But there was a recent incursion attributed to China. I haven't seen any response yet. Talk to me about your role at Cyber Command in deterrence. We're calling it hunt forward and various those kinds of things, but really we're talking about, I want the Politburo worried about you when they think about discussing a cyber attack on the United States.
Senator, first, I think that both of our pacing adversaries are well aware of the capabilities that we have. The way we approach these problems and we think about integrated deterrence from a cyber perspective and how we partner with the interagency, with our allies, and with industry, we think about how do we generate insights? How do we understand and articulate that threat, both inside and with our partners? Second is how do we enable defense? And then third is if called upon, we impose costs.
That's the part that I'm concerned about. By the way, I misspoke. I don't think the Politburo exists anymore. I think it's just Putin, and that probably is one of his problems. But the point is there should be some level of apprehension about a response. Otherwise, they're just going to keep coming after us. We cannot patch our way out of this.
And Senator, from our perspective, while not talking about any specific operations, how we approach our teammates in the interagency, and how that we are able, It could be enabling a sanction. It could be enabling a very targeted demarche that's exposed an adversary activity. It can be public disclosure of those capabilities. Those are cost imposing.
That's right. I'm not suggesting it has to be cyber for cyber, but there has to be some response, and I think that's where we've failed in the last several decades. We have these cyber attacks, nothing really happens in response. One final question. You talked about 702. General officers tend to be very moderate and not deal in hyperbole, but is it possible to overstate the catastrophe for national security if 702 isn't reauthorized?
Senator, in my experience, 31 years, it is irreplaceable in terms of our ability to answer critical questions for the nation, for the combatant commanders. When we see things like the origins of fentanyl in China and its path it takes to the United States, informed by 702, counterterrorism actions, the ability to see some of the egregious acts that Russia has done in Ukraine, informed by 702. Those are just examples, at the declassified level of what it provides, while also having an extensive set of control measures to ensure that every query, everything that we've done to target a foreign person overseas is done consistent with the oversight of the DOJ, of the court, of the DNI, and anytime anything goes wrong, a report to all of the oversight committees.
Mr. Chairman, we would be unilaterally disarming in the face of one of the most serious sets of threats this country's ever faced. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator King. Senator Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, and appreciate your time in my office with our visit. Just a couple of questions. One, and I know that AI is a big topic, not just here, but it's become culturally socialized now. People have a lot of questions and don't know where this is headed, and I think that for me, sort of dividing this into from a military context and more of the commercial application, and we're still trying to figure that out and get a lot of information. But on the military side, obviously, civilizations have come and gone based on, if somebody else gets a better technology and moves ahead militarily. So it's a very important race that we're engaged in. From your perspective, has the Department of Defense done enough to integrate AI into our various platforms?
Senator, I'll really...
And I guess what does that look like, too, is probably a follow-up.
Senator, where I'll really focus on are those areas that are within my responsibility, really looking at how we think about cybersecurity. There are a couple key areas in there that we've done really well in terms of across each of the services, the big data platforms that we built for cybersecurity, we built them on a common framework. One of the things that the Congress authorized and the Department enabled was also a weapon system inside of U.S. Cyber Command called Unified Platform that allows us to see that data across the entire department. So we've got some foundational components in place. I think our next challenge, and we owe you back a study by the fall, is what does that roadmap look like to acceleration and use of these technologies to be able to give us the greatest advantage, give our analysts and our defenders the greatest advantage, and allowing us to scale, and then doing it in a way that you're very comfortable with.
And I guess, we've obviously, recently China has hacked our systems, and this is not the first time, it's not the last time. But one question is, I guess just want to try to get at, do you feel like a layered, multi-vendor approach gives us more protection? I mean, one of the concerns that I have is if you have a single vendor, you have less competition, you have less, again, layers of protection. I just want to get your thoughts. I'm not trying to, this isn't a trick question, I'm just trying to get your feeling on this, your thoughts on this.
So when we look at, Senator, from a cybersecurity perspective, we do have a blended series of vendors that we leverage. And from that allows us to really play to strengths. And when we think about where we're going in the cloud architecture of the department, multiple vendors to be able to leverage their inherent strengths based off mission. And I think that inherently, how we then grow those partnerships from a cybersecurity perspective is both a strength to us and to those respective companies.
And do you see your role, I mean, we've talked a lot about, it's really a focus of a lot of my questions in the Indo-PACOM. You mentioned this previously, and a lot of times when you ask questions this late in the game, they sort of ask them again. But that relationship, your resources, you feel like you have the resources to be fully integrated there? Because to me, those are where our biggest threats are from and will be from.
Senator, the support to Admiral Aquilino, we just completed Cyber Command and Indo-PACOM staff talks to ensure of our alignment and how we collaborate to ensure that we, from a cyber perspective, help them set the theater. And that includes our partnerships and aligning to make sure that Cyber Command is helping enable the partnerships that Indo-PACOM feels is essential. There are also some specific capabilities they're asking us for. Those have been authorized and by Congress and by the department, and have put us in a position to be able to deliver those capabilities for Indo-PACOM.
You and I had a conversation, and obviously I expressed to you that a desire to get some of this divisive politics out of our military, and I think we had a very good conversation about that, of best and brightest and merit-based, and that where our focus should be, and get some of this divisive stuff out. Also, I do want to mention that you don't have to comment on this because this is not related to you specifically, but there are some in the intelligence community, I think, that have viewed their role as determining what people can hear and see and think. CISA specifically has engaged in part of a censorship enterprise working with big tech to shut down speech. And I don't actually think that's debatable anymore. Those are the facts. And so I would just, a word of caution to be very aware of that. Obviously, you're dealing with real threats, but I think the First Amendment's very important. If we are who we say we are, and we believe in this robust marketplace of speech, people should be able to have opinions, even if they're ones that you don't agree with. And I don't think the government or the intelligence community's role is to decide those things. Let the American people decide that. So that's just something I think for you to keep your eye on, as some people view their role as the decider of who gets to hear what, and I think that's the wrong approach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. General Hogg, congratulations to you. I want to follow up on 2 points that were raised by my colleague, Senator Manchin, budgets and allies. So on budgets, maybe particular with some colleagues here, we could get rid of the most commonly occurring CRs immediately if we would switch the federal budget year from October 1 to January 1. If you look at when we actually get appropriations deals done over the last 30 years, we never get them done by September 30. We almost always get them done in December. Why is that? It's because our leaders basically, at the end of the year, when people want to go spend time with their family, say we're not going home until we get appropriations bills done. Now, every once in a while we go into the following year, but usually we're getting them done right when we leave. If we switched the federal fiscal year to a January 1, December 31 fiscal year, that pressure would still be on us. I don't think we would say, well, let's do it at the end of March. I think the leadership would still force us to do it. This has become such a norm here that even in the debt ceiling deal that we just did, we imposed a set of punishments on ourselves if we didn't get the deal done by December 31. We all know that that's the real time now. And I just think we could eliminate an awful lot of the CR concern that Senator Manchin raised if we would just analyze and then be honest about what is the real budget calendar up here. A friend of mine who is a landscape architect said, if you're doing a landscape, don't put down the sidewalks, do the landscape, then see where people walk, and they'll make a path and then build the sidewalks there. We are showing where the path is to budgets and getting rid of CR. So I'll just tell my colleagues, on September 30 this year, I'm going to introduce a bill to change the budget year to a calendar year. And if it turns out that we get approps deals done by September 30, I'll admit that I'm wrong, but I'm not going to be wrong, and I'm going to introduce that bill, and I would love anybody else joining me in it. I'm on the Budget Committee. I'd like to convince them to do that budget process change. General Hogg, Senator Manchin asked you about alliances, and I want to ask about a particular one. The NDAA that we're debating now on the floor will include provisions regarding the AUKUS framework. So this is a framework that has 2 pillars. Pillar 1 deals with submarine technology, the working with the Australians to build up a nuclear submarine industrial base in the 2030s. That would involve some transfer of U.S. subs should we be able to kind of figure out the details right in the 2040s. The Australians would have their own submarine production capacity. But there's also Pillar 2 of the AUKUS deal, which focuses upon cooperation with the UK and Australia on cyber, artificial intelligence, hypersonics, other advanced technologies. You talk generally about the work that we do in the cyberspace with allies, recognizing we're in an unclassified setting. Let's focus a little bit more on what you might see as upside opportunities in this framework with Australia and the UK.
Senator, in terms of our partners in the Indo-Pacific, Australia and New Zealand are clearly have been long-standing allies.
Two of the Five Eyes nations, so we have huge equities with them.
And then, of course, the UK and how we think about Europe and those partners. Our partnership with both Australia and the UK, both bilaterally and multilaterally, AUKUS presents another opportunity. And it presents us an opportunity to do that through the lens of the threat of the People's Republic of China. So from a Pillar 2 perspective, opportunity for us to really think our way through how best as all three nations and all three militaries to think about those technologies.
Great, thank you. I noticed you're a Russian major, Russian studies major, and I wonder in the cyber field, I would think that language fluency would be a big component of trying to build out a good workforce, and you would be sensitive to that from that background. And I know within military speak, this is often called LREC, Language Regional Expertise and Culture, as a kind of a strategic advantage for folks. How are you doing within Cyber Command in terms of building out a workforce that has, language capacities to enable us to be at our best?
Senator, we've done well. Inside each one of our teams, we do have language capability. Different services have approached it through different ways and how they've grown that, whether through their cryptologic community or additional training. It's an absolutely incredibly important part of our force. And as we think about what our balance is, if confirmed, that'll also be the area that I look at in terms of the balance of which languages based off the threats we face today.
Thank you for your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Ernst, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, General Hawk. It's good to see you, and I want to thank your family as well for joining you today. We appreciate their support. General, I've heard from special operations leaders that they are making significant investments in what they are calling their cyber, special operations forces, and space triad, kind of that grouping there. And what is your view of this new operating concept for strategic competition and conflict? What does that look like to you?
Senator, starting with the partnership with Special Operations Command, and when you look at Special Operations Command, U.S. Space Command, and U.S. Cyber Command, really have global focus in terms of how we approach the support with the other combatant commands. Each of us bring really strategic competitive advantages. And from a cyberspace perspective, our unique authorities and our global presence. With Special Operations Command, physical presence with each of the combatant commands. And it offers us an opportunity to look at where each of us can come together to work in support of a geographic combatant commander's needs and be able to do that more effectively together. Personal experience for me, as the component to EUCOM, every day we were working with Special Operations Command Europe to be able to look at how could we together do what the EUCOM commander needed. We have an embedded staff with Special Operations Command and their components. It is our Marine component within U.S. Cyber Command, Marforce Cyber, that leads that effort for Cyber Command.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important to explain how all of these commands work together cohesively. You explained the physical presence of those SOCOM operators. Can you also explain how that ties in with Space Force then as well?
So, Senator, when we think about what those challenges are, and we think about the resiliency that is going to be required as we think about what potential future conflict could look like, how do we ensure both a redundant set of communications? Much of that's going to be built on space. So the partnership between Cyber Command and Space Command and the Space Force is really inextricable in terms of how we think about the support to the Joint Force. With Special Operations Command, we also want to ensure that they are well defended from a cyberspace perspective, that where we have a responsibility to ensure that we are collaborating, we understand those unique communications needs, and how we defend individual SOCOM activities is also a core thing we're thinking about.
Wonderful. Well, and I appreciate the time that you took the other day in my office to explain this concept to me, and I know how appreciative SOCOM is as well. And how do you foresee this with Cyber Command and SOCOM working together? How do you see that you will be able to help each other fulfill your traditional missions more efficiently?
In the way that we approach it right now, Senator, we're looking for what is those hard requirements that a geographic combatant commander needs, and those are the areas that we're focused on. How do we work together to achieve something that would have been more difficult independently? But when we partner with the unique strengths of Special Operations Command and SOCOM components with what our cyber mission force brings, that capacity tied together, our goal is to satisfy hard problems for the geographic combatant commands.
Really appreciate that, because as we have gone and seen in this committee the constraints that we will be under with the budget, moving forward, we need to make sure that we are able to operate efficiently, and all of you working together rather than in individual silos is just much better for us as decision makers and much better for the mission as well. So I just want for the other members on the committee is just to once again reiterate how important it is that we have all of our commands working together. I'm glad that you have that relationship. You mentioned General Fenton the other day, our Special Operations Command commander, and the relationships that have been built there. You also mentioned General Kurilla and others that Cyber Command will continue to work with around the globe. So really appreciate that. How important it just from your perspective, I'm saying it, but from your perspective, how important it is that Cyber Command remain tied in with all of these other combatant commanders and the relationships there.
Senator, when you look at the 3 missions that have been assigned to you as Cyber Command, defend the department's network, that really is in support of all the combatant commands and their ability to execute, our ability to defend the nation and the other combatant commands from adversary hacking, and then the 3rd very specified mission is to deliver offensive and defensive capabilities in support of the other combatant commands.
Very glad to have you being nominated into this position, General Hawk, and once again, thanks to your family as well for being here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. Senator Peters, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, good to see you again. Enjoyed our conversation in the office earlier. As you know, I chair the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee in addition to being a member of this committee. And so I'm concerned that, that our military installations here at home in the homeland may be vulnerable to attacks by adversaries seeking to disrupt or even prevent normal operations and the movement of forces within the United States. These adversaries may seek to exploit base resilience on infrastructure in the surrounding communities that help to sustain just everyday base functions. So given the interdependency between critical civilian infrastructure, military installations, and local civilian communities, how would you envision Cybercom's role compared to the DHS role to identify, to defend, and report cyber threats posed to DoD installations and their surrounding communities, particularly those installations who are charged with deploying combat capabilities abroad or are essential to national security?
Senator, it's a great question. And to start with, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency is a great teammate and collaborator with U.S. Cyber Command. Major concepts that we're thinking about and what we've really learned through our partnership with European Command, U.S. Strategic Command, and U.S. Transcom as it relates to Ukraine. 2 concepts of set the theater, how did we help EUCOM ensure their networks were secure and they had resilient communications, and then set the globe. Because in reality, anytime that the Department of Defense is operating, it really is a global set of connectivity that begins in the United States. So when we think about generating force from Transcom, when we think about our nuclear command and control, that is inherently a partnership that rests on the infrastructure of the United States. Areas that in my experience, I've worked incredibly close with CISA as part of the original lead for the election defense activities that we conducted in U.S. Cyber Command NSA in support of Homeland Security. That was one of my first functions in U.S. Cyber Command, and have now been part of that for 3 years. One of the areas the department is investing in, we currently have a strong liaison presence with DHS and they with us. The department is going to expand that to allow us to have liaisons with each sector that CISA is responsible for. So I see this partnership only growing.
Right. Are there best practices that you would recommend to streamline and optimize the collaboration between Cybercom and DHS, CISA in particular?
So I think, Senator, the area that we can contribute with our OSD colleagues and our other combatant commands is to articulate what infrastructure is important to the department. So we owe that to ensure that, and we do that well today, but that will continue to change. As technology changes, as our demands on industry change, and as our infrastructure changes, we have to ensure that there's a really clear understanding with not only our teammates in DHS, but if there's a different sector agency that's responsible, but the infrastructure that CISA has to be able to work with individual sectors, how their ISACs do information sharing, those are inherent strengths for the nation, and those are areas that we should be really good partners.
Right. I recently returned from a trip to the Western Balkans where I heard from our Albanian allies about the devastating Iranian cyber attacks against their country. And it's certainly that these types of attacks by both nation-state and non-state actors are going on frequently and in severity against our allies. I certainly want to applaud the actions of our embassy in Tirana, along with support provided by the FBI, Microsoft, UCOM, Cybercom, and others that responded very swiftly and professionally when requested by the Albanian government. Given that, unfortunately, this threat's only going to increase in this space, and they're likely to be the target of increased attacks from the Iranians. So my question for you is, what action should Cybercom and interagency be taking now to better help partners and allies proactively defend against this threat? Then the second part of the question is, how can we provide more robust medium to long-term cyber recovery relief with U.S. private sector support to help these countries rebuild their cyber infrastructure, just as we would help a country recover from a natural disaster?
Senator, first, in terms of the Albania, I too have met with Albanian leadership, and we, as part of the team that has responded based off of guidance from the department, and then with our interagency teammates to ensure that we can get their networks back up and operating in concert also with their state partner to be able to make them more resilient. It's an example, I think, from our perspective of how do we share information. So how do we share information in terms of threats with our allies and with industry in a way that makes everyone more resilient? And that is an area that from the Albanian perspective, is a good example of areas that we could contribute.
Great. Thank you, General. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Peters. Before I recognize Senator Budd, I will formally turn over the chairmanship temporarily to Senator King. I have to go to the Appropriations Committee. Senator Budd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. General Hawk, thanks for being here this morning again. Thanks for your family. I enjoyed our conversation last week, so it's good to see you again. So I want to focus on AI. I know there's been lots of questions this morning, and also we'll talk about advanced computing. So do you believe that the United States currently holds an advantage in AI technologies?
Senator, I do.
So one of the challenges faced by Cybercom and NSA is recruiting and retaining talent. And a lot of the focus has been on cyber operators. We talked about that. But we also need analysts with both computer science backgrounds and also language skills. So can AI that uses large language models to interpret and analyze audio or text, can that replace the need for analysts, or is that just is AI a tool to more empower workers? And how should we be thinking about that?
Senator, from our perspective, it would be an enabler for an analyst to look at the most important data that would answer a foreign intelligence question or enable our planning. So it would be an enabler, not a replacement.
Thank you. So I want to talk about the cyber threat posed by China. We learned this week that China hacked the Secretary of Commerce, Raimondo, and the State Department in advance of
bilateral talks. So when we spoke last week, you mentioned that probably the most pressing challenge is China's advanced efforts to steal American intellectual property. So could you please further elaborate on that threat and why it matters? And if confirmed, what do you believe your role is to inform the public on and to respond to those attacks?
Senator, the PRC has done a sustained campaign over decades to steal intellectual property. And it really is intended to enable their economy to be able to create economic advantage and also to buy down the military advantage that the United States has. It's been persistent, it has been continuous, and it will continue. From our perspective, it is our job, both as Cyber Command and NSA, to be a part of the team that exposes that threat. Today, if you go to the National Security Agency website, you'll see a series of reports that lay out in detail how China hackers operate and what that looks like. That's intended to very clearly pass out to not just our allies, but to our industry leaders, how China operates and how they can defend. So we should be being as transparent as we can. We should be collaborating with industry wherever we can and working with our interagency teammates to ensure wherever they have responsibility that we're clearly articulating the threat and we're thinking about this from a common defense perspective.
I appreciate you making that publicly available and hope, if confirmed, that you'll make that event, if you'll promote that, I think that'd be helpful. So you also explained that China focused its AI on expanding information control. We talked a little bit about that this morning. So what is Cybercom's role in supporting the interagency to defeat information control, and how confident are you in your ability to accomplish that task?
So Senator, I think when we're thinking about that, first and foremost is we drive what activities we work are really aligned against what the other combatant commanders need. So when we're thinking from a cyber command perspective, we're aligning what are the capabilities we need will be driven by those combatant commanders. From a national security agency perspective, if confirmed in that role, it's really NSA's job to identify the threat and to be able to communicate that threat across our interagency to then be able to determine what's the best approach if that technology is being proliferated.
Thank you. So how is Cybercom leveraging commercial partnerships to combat threats and maintain our competitive advantage? And are there ways to do that better?
Senator, I think right now we do have collaborative relationships with industry, and particularly with small business. That's really where the department focused us initially. Now, as we gain our budget control and our acquisition authority, that will allow us to expand how we interact with industry and certainly be able to bring much more resource. That will enable us to operate with more speed and agility aligned with our requirements, and we're excited about that opportunity.
Thank you, General. I wish you luck.
Thanks.
On behalf of the chair, Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Senator King. Appreciate the hearing. And General Hogg, we had such a lovely conversation. I know everyone is saying that. I really appreciate what we chatted about, and I so appreciate the family that moves and moves and moves along with you and does all the hard work to be sure that you can be happy at home and productive in your work. So thank you. I want to talk a little bit about, my colleagues have been talking about all these things, AI, everything else, but in order to achieve our goals, all of these goals that everyone's talked about, we have to have the workforce. So even with AI that Senator Budd talked about, you really need a person to make that final important decision that takes all the data, puts it down, and gives it to someone. And so in March, the DoD released its cyber workforce strategy to address the gaps in workforce management, to ensure we're equipped to address the growing cyber threats from our adversaries. So we discussed in our meeting just this week my Civilian Cybersecurity Reserve Act, which would provide the Department of Defense with qualified civilian personnel in our greatest time of need. It was included in this year's pilot program and this year's Senate NDAA. So what is your view, as we spoke about the non-traditional reserve models, such as establishing a civilian cybersecurity reserve to support DoD's cyberspace operation, the kind of talent and maybe that it needs and the depth of experience that it needs?
Senator Rosen, I think if confirmed, one of the roles that I have the opportunity to do is really be an advocate for STEM education. when we think about the National Security Agency and the need that NSA has in terms of a very technical workforce, the work that we can also be advocating for with the services to make sure the services are able to recruit the right talent. And that really starts with being able to tap all the talent in the United States. So if confirmed, I would really look forward to working with the department, work with your team as we think about what's the right type of pilot that would allow us to really think through how we could leverage a broader portion of our population.
Thank you. I look forward to working on that with you. And I think as we think about our workforce and our reserve force and that partnership, we have to think about our international cyber partnerships, right? And so the National Cybersecurity Strategy, well, it does rightly identify that strengthening our international partnerships, that capacity is really a pillar of our collective cybersecurity. We don't do it alone. The threats come from everywhere, and we're stronger together when we can share information. So our Hunt Forward operations in Ukraine have demonstrated really the true value of these international partnerships are critical to identifying and stopping malicious cyber activity before it threatens our critical infrastructure and our key resources. And so the Nevada National Guard has 3 partner nations as part of the state partnership program: Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa. So if confirmed, how would you leverage the state partnership program to bolster cyber partnerships with our allies and partners?
Senator, in one of my first Cyber Command jobs, when we went to operate with one of our partners, we found a state partner program already there. So we know that they're already there. They have long-standing relationships. We want to leverage that, and we also want to make sure that if there are some of the states that are trying to build a cyber partnership, how do we help them do that? Mm-hmm. How do we ensure they have the right threat information? How do they have the right interstates? We want to leverage the state partnership program. It's been a huge effort for us. As the department in the new cybersecurity strategy articulates, the next area of priority in terms of mission is our partners and allies. And so that's clearly an area that, if confirmed, will be a priority for me.
Well, fantastic. And I want to build a little bit on what Senator Budd was talking about China, and others have talked about this, and Chinese cyber aggression, particularly on Taiwan, and its impact and potential threat to us, as we see that acutely aware that China poses a threat in the cyber domain, and it's using Taiwan as a testing ground for its cyber capabilities. And recent cyber attacks have forced Taiwan to harden their defenses. What we learn there can save us here. So China's closely monitoring the outcome of Russia's invasion on Ukraine to apply the lessons possibly learned to a potential invasion of Taiwan. And so that's why this Congress, with Senator Rounds and Congressman Gallagher, bipartisan legislation that we introduced to expand American military cybersecurity cooperation with Taiwan. And so this legislation has been included in both the House and Senate versions of the NDAA for fiscal year 2024. So if confirmed, how would you work to expand military to military cybersecurity cooperation with Taiwan to strengthen their deterrent capabilities and raise the cost of escalation for China?
Senator, U.S. Cyber Command currently has a partnership with Taiwan. We'll work with Indo-PACOM and ensure that that remains strong.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Hawk, first of all, you're getting a lot of practice at this because you're responsible not just in this committee but also within Intel in the dual-hatted role that you play. I want to thank you for your service to our country as well as your family. You've heard that from a number of folks up here, and we really do recognize that there's a challenge for the family because you do move regularly, and we understand that it's not something that a lot of folks across our country probably understand as a part of the mission that you have. So thank you for that sacrifice for you and the family. I have followed up in each of our hearings this year and asked each of the individuals coming before us in command positions the following, and it has to do with, I believe that we have a very serious issue with regard to spectrum, and specifically with regard to the proposed sale by some members of Congress suggesting that we should sell portions of the spectrum in the area of 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz. And this is an area in which we have significant defensive capabilities. and that we utilize today. Based on your knowledge of this issue, if there is a report which is due out in September, if that report demonstrates that auctioning off this 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz portion of the spectrum will adversely impact our national security, what would be your advice to the President and Congress?
Senator, I am following the ongoing study. If that comes back as high risk, I would recommend not to share.
Thank you. There seems to be someone somehow has continued to push this narrative that this portion of the spectrum should be sold for commercial purposes. In your professional military opinion, do you believe it's possible that our adversaries may very well be attempting to influence this debate and push the sale of this spectrum that is vital to our national security?
Senator, in my current role, I haven't seen indications that that's occurring. I would expect that is a drumbeat in standards bodies and things along that line from in terms of trying to influence areas that would disadvantage the United States and advantage China.
And in this particular case, that would disadvantage this country.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Let me move on to another area. This committee was successful in including a provision within the Senate's version of the NDAA which would authorize the Department of Defense to conduct cyber operations against transnational criminal organizations, including the cartels. How would you use these increased authorities to enhance the whole of government approach to combating transnational criminal organizations?
Senator, if there were authorities assigned to U.S. Cyber Command, both in the law and by the department, our first stop is always the supported commander. And in this case, we would have conversations with the U.S. Northern Command commander about priorities and where we would fit into an overall strategy that would really be interagency approach and support to what U.S. Northern Command needs.
Clearly, you could bring capabilities to the fight.
Senator.
Thank you. We are also undergoing the largest overhaul of our nuclear triad in decades, and we're doing so against the specter of two nuclear near-peer rivals. All elements of our nuclear deterrent, including our command and control systems, are being modernized. The cybersecurity of our NC3 systems must be a top priority. In the current and projected threat environment, what do you see as the biggest challenges for nuclear command and control from a cyber perspective? And I ask that recognizing that we're in an unclassified environment.
Senator, I think from our perspective, this is our partnership with Strategic Command is focused on ensuring the resiliency and health of our NC3 enterprise. And so from a Cyber Command perspective, both today and if confirmed, we've got a strong relationship with STRATCOM. We just held a collaborative conference that brought in the services, brought in all of our partners to work to ensure that we were providing the best threat intelligence and also thinking our way through the architecture as they advance to ensure they're doing it in a way that we would recommend from a cybersecurity perspective. The role that Congress has done to give the U.S. Strategic Command the responsibility for the overall NC3 enterprise has also allowed us to really focus on the priorities that come from General Cotton, and we're closely aligned with him and will continue to do so if confirmed.
Thank you. And General, I do look forward to supporting your nomination. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
On behalf of the chairman, Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Senator King. Thank you, General, for being here today, and my thanks to your family for the support they offer you, but also for the sacrifices that they make for this country as well. So thank you, sir. I'd like to just follow up a little bit with my colleague questioning you on NC3. I understand the relationship you have with STRATCOM, with General Cotton. I'm very pleased to hear about your work in establishing that architecture. But can you tell us where you believe we are in the process there? And in this setting, what has been done, what still needs to be done, and if you think the timeline we are currently on is appropriate?
Senator, what I can speak to is in terms to how STRATCOM has really approached ensuring they have visibility of the NC3 enterprise, how they've aligned their components to ensure that they're focused on the cybersecurity of the enterprise, and then the clear requirements that Stratcom has given to U.S. Cyber Command and our components to ensure that it is secured. In terms of the investment strategy, I defer that to General Cotton.
Okay, thank you. I appreciated our discussion earlier this week on Cybercom and NSA's efforts to share more information with the public, especially about network vulnerabilities. As I told you in our conversation, I think that the more the American people have a fuller understanding of the threats we face, I know that they would be very, very supportive of the actions we need to take to make sure this country is safe. In this setting, can you speak to the value of those types of advisories on known cybersecurity threats and how they can be better leveraged to protect non-governmental assets?
Senator, I think this is an area that from an NSA and a Cyber Command perspective, the ability to share information that allows both our companies to be more resilient, so a complete understanding of what the threat environment looks like at an unclassified level makes everything go more quickly, so we can move with speed. In terms of sharing what those threats look like, we would want every American to be able to understand what is the threat, particularly if we're thinking about ransomware, or in the future, what threats come from generative AI, and how would that enable a hacker? Those are conversations that we should be having very routinely, both in how we communicate and in the documents that we put out, but also in how we engage the U.S. population.
You know, you not only protect Department of Defense, our national security, the assets that we have, but also what is your relationship to private companies that have critical infrastructure? For example, transmission lines, our ports, our airports, nuclear power facilities. Can you just on a high level tell us what your relationship is there and your feelings about it, how secure it is?
Senator, from our perspective in U.S. Cyber Command, the National Security Agency, the Department of Defense is the sector-specific lead for the defense industrial base. So in terms of a series of direct sharing relationships with that segment, our close partnership with CISA in terms of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, as they lead, and in this case, for those type of activities with the Department of Energy, they are our partner. So we want to ensure that both to CISA and the DOE, they're getting the best threat information to allow them to ensure the sector leads across the sector councils within energy are getting that data. I've seen that. I've been a part of that activity in the past. Our ability, if confirmed, to sustain that and expand it, that'll be an area that'll be a priority.
You know, when we go outside of the United States, it's important that we collaborate with our allies as well. And have our partners in a cyber domain. It's important in this country. It is important with other governments as well. How do you believe that you will be able to increase that collaboration?
In terms of our partners, today we have a really good set of international partnerships. And as U.S. Cyber Command continues to grow, if confirmed, how we apply our budget that allows us to also look at how we expand those foreign partnerships is an area that we'll certainly consider.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
On behalf of the chair, Senator Warren.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our nation's adversaries use crypto to evade sanctions and to fund their weapons programs, spying, and cyber attacks. Now, dirty crypto transactions are often hidden, but here's the part we know for sure. In 2022, cyber criminals aligned with rogue nations received over $8 billion in crypto payments in violation of U.S. sanctions. Top of the list in its love for crypto is North Korea. Last year, North Korea stole a record-breaking $1.7 billion in crypto, about two-thirds of which was stolen from crypto's so-called decentralized finance, or DeFi, space, which allows actors to bypass traditional regulated financial intermediaries to move funds around. Over the past 5 years, North Korean hackers have stolen, that we know of, more than $3 billion in crypto. So where does that money go? Straight into North Korea's illegal nuclear program. General Hawk, as Deputy Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, you've seen the scale of North Korea's campaign to pay for its nuclear program with stolen, laundered crypto. Do you know how much of North Korea's missile program has been funded by the spoils of crypto crime and cyber attacks?
Senator, I don't have a specific number, but I do know that from a nation state, a ransomware actor, and DPRK, both in their cryptocurrency theft and how they enable IT workers to gain funds, it's an enabler for both the hackers from a nation state and a ransomware perspective, and it is certainly an enabler for the DPRK to raise funds focused on their military program.
Okay, and I think the best estimates are about half of their nuclear program is paid for with stolen crypto funds. Would that number surprise you?
It wouldn't, Senator.
All right. So according to a recent Wall Street Journal report, since 2018, when North Korea began ramping up its large-scale crypto attacks, its missile launch attempts and successes have, quote, mushroomed. In other words, that money has been valuable to advance what they want to do. Cyber Command, the agency that you're nominated to lead, has played a critical role in helping law enforcement agencies track and seize crypto wallets used by North Korean hackers to steal millions of dollars in crypto and to launder that money through Chinese crypto networks. From your experience, General Hawk, when North Korea steals billions of dollars worth of crypto and uses Chinese money laundering networks and pours that money into its nuclear programs, does that pose a threat to our national security?
It does, Senator.
So I really appreciate your forthright comments here. As you know, North Korea is not the only issue. Russian ransomware gangs, Chinese fentanyl manufacturers, transnational drug cartels, and others are using crypto to exploit the loopholes in our nation's anti-money laundering network. General Hawk, the Treasury Department recently recommended that the government strengthen our nation's anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism rules by, quote, closing any identified gaps in the Bank Secrecy Act to the extent that they allow certain DeFi services to fall outside the scope of the BSA's definition of financial institutions. So let me ask you, do you agree that we need to stitch the loopholes that allow the DPRK and other dangerous actors to use crypto to fill their coffers?
Senator, I'm not really aware of that specific recommendation. We would, and that is certainly an area that we're focused on from a threat perspective, and would love to be able to work with you on what is the way that we can limit adversary hackers that threaten the United States through every means.
All righty. You know, Senator Roger Marshall and I are reintroducing our crypto anti-money laundering legislation to close the gaps that let these bad actors skirt our country's laws and threaten our national security. Congress can't continue to sleep while North Korea and China and Russia are using crypto to threaten America's national security. So I want to close. I know I'm out of time. I just want to say one word, if I can, with your indulgence, about the impact of the senator from Alabama's holds on our senior military nominees. These officers have served our country honorably for decades, and they don't deserve to be treated like a political football. I very much hope that the hold will be lifted so that we can move forward on these nominations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. On behalf of the chairman, Senator Jill Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the vulnerability equities policy and process establish how the government balances equities and makes determinations regarding the disclosure or retention of newly discovered zero-day vulnerabilities. As we saw in recent reporting about PRC compromise of critical infrastructure in Guam, the PRC is looking to hold our critical infrastructure at risk in the event of a crisis between our countries. How will this increased threat to U.S. infrastructure inform your thinking regarding retention versus disclosure of identified vulnerabilities?
Senator, in my experience, I've worked as part of the VEP process. It's effective at ensuring that there is a really good balance. And if I look at how we approach this in a transparent way, we publish what that looks like as the U.S. government, and then counterbalance that with the law that China has passed and how they're thinking and mandating each company having to turn over every vulnerability directly to the People's Republic of China and their cyber actors. Certainly, we're taking a very transparent, balanced approach versus an information control approach.
You recently commanded the 16th Air Force, which executes the Air Force's cyber missions. The 16th Air Force has entered into a range of cooperative research and development agreements with public and private entities to advance its cyber missions. As a commander, what did these agreements offer you, and how did they advance our nation's cybersecurity?
Senator, the cooperative nature of them really help both sides of each of those partnerships. An example of those, we really looked in particular at things that would have been threats to our bases, in particular the electrical systems that were on our bases. So allowing us to do cooperative research with an academia and with industry to be able to think about those threats internally as they also then applied that research to be a part of our nation's response.
Section 1502 of the fiscal year 23 NDAA requires an annual report on the support Cyber Command receives from the military services. We've had several hearings on this to see which services are providing personnel, which ones are having challenges. Will you commit to being direct and candid with Congress in your 1502 reports and working to ensure that those are submitted on time each year? And will you make recommendations to this committee about how to make sure you have the complement of cyber warriors that you need to complete your missions?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. On behalf of the chair, before I close the committee session, General, I want to thank you again for your service. Thank you to your family, which has been very much appreciated and observed today. Your answers have been impressive, thoughtful, and forthright, and I think it speaks very well for your continued or your prospective stewardship of these two important agencies. I also hope that you will convey my deep regard and respect to your predecessor, General Nakasone, who I believe is one of the most capable public servants I have ever worked with. I think the work that he did subsequent to the 2016 election in 2018 and 20 was leadership at its best, creative leadership at its best. And I hope you'll convey that thought to General Nakasone and to Susan. Thank you again for your testimony today. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and we look forward to working with you in these incredibly important, dangerous, but times that we can turn to our advantage given the skills of yourself and the great people that you'll be leading. Thank you.
Thanks,
Hearing
Senator.
is adjourned.